We all know the fastest possible mate in chess is the fool's mate, where the opponent can mate in just 2 moves. But what is the fastest way to draw a game by stalemate? You'd assume with the engines we have in the modern era of chess, the fastest possible sequence to get stalemate would be pretty easy to find, right? The fastest possible stalemate in chess is stalemate in just 10 moves. The craziest part? It was found by a man named Sam Lloyd over 150 years ago, before engines had even existed. Today we're not only going to look at the fastest possible stalemate, but the fastest stalemate ever achieved in a real game. It is absolutely insane to think that in just 10 moves time, this entire board will be stalemate. I've seen a few videos covering this stalemate in particular, but for some reason nobody ever explains why certain moves are being played on the board. So I'm going to do my best to explain why certain moves are played in the grand scheme of things. We start off with the move e3, and we can already ask questions here. Why e3? Well, we want to get our queen on the most active square possible. The queen is basically the only piece that we are going to move as the white pieces. There is no need to develop the minor pieces here. We're not going for a traditional checkmate. We are trying to stalemate our opponent, and very importantly, our opponent is also trying to get stalemated. If you were wondering why not c3, you would be absolutely correct. You can completely play c3 and play queen a4. It is still stalemate in 10, so it doesn't really matter. But the big question is, why not e4? Well, this is completely pointless. There's no reason for the pawn to be on e4. We don't need to blockade this pawn in this specific composition, and we actually blockade this important file. This queen wants to come down to d3 at some point, and the pawn being in the way would add an extra move to the total moves. If that was confusing now, it won't be later, and black's first move will be a5. We need to get rid of that pawn, and we are going to continue with our plan of playing queen h4, just targeting this pawn. It is now also obvious why we could play c3, because our intention is to go and grab this pawn. If we played c3, we could have played queen a4 and grabbed the pawn this way. It didn't really make a difference. Of course, black is going to help us in this stalemate, and they are going to play rook a6, and after we capture that pawn, they are not going to capture back with their rook. The rook needs to go to a6 because it needs to find somewhere on the board to trap itself. If you look at a few pieces right now, the bishop, the queen, the king, this bishop, and this rook, they are all trapped, but the issue is they have pawns in front of them that can move. So to eventually trap the a6 rook, black is going to play h5, to which we respond with h4 of our own. We are now blockading this pawn and allowing this rook somewhere to go and trap itself. The rook is simply going to continue with this plan, and then we start feasting on the pawns. The issue with this position is there are so many pawns, we can't just blockade them all, so we are going to have to take a few with our queen. Obviously, again, black has no interest in taking our queen. They also want to be stalemated, so they continue with the move f6. You might think the move f6 is a little bit peculiar. I mean, black just played h5 and we blockaded it with our pawn, so what is the purpose of f6? Well, that one's easy. The king needs somewhere to go. It can't stay where it is because there will be no stalemate if it stays on that square, even if the pawns were here, just because we can't manage all of these pawns at once. The king is eventually going to go here, and this queen is destined for this square, trapping itself in. So we start to push the king over in that direction. We take this pawn. Black has no intention to take back, although it can do so with 4 pieces. It moves its king and gets it closer to where it wants to end up on, and then we can take the final pawn that we will take with our queen. Now, if you were confused before, here is where it'll all make sense. The reason that we played e3 and not e4 is because black's next move is queen d3, the fastest reroute into this square. Black will play queen h7 and then king g6, and the queen will be trapped. But if this pawn was on e4, it would have to capture the pawn first, which would be an unnecessary move when you can just play e3 to begin with. Now we're going to continue to capture more of black's pieces, but it's very important which one we capture first. We have to capture the knight. And after black retreats its queen, getting it trapped, we're going to capture the bishop now. And you can see this king is destined for this square, and now we have stalemate. If we captured in the other order, our queen would be on the b8 square and it wouldn't be able to stalemate here, but as you can see, this knight has nowhere to go. The rooks are trapped, the queen is trapped, this rook is trapped, the pawn is blockaded, this one is pinned, this one is blockaded, and this is stalemate in 10 moves. To this day, chess engines had failed to find a stalemate faster than the one Sam Lloyd found 150 years ago. Even though Sam Lloyd's composition was truly incredible, especially for its time, it's no doubt that that position will never be reached in a real game of chess. The fastest stalemate ever achieved in a real chess game is stalemate in just 26 moves. It was played by Italian Grandmaster Sergio Mariotti and Italian FIDE Master Mario Sibilio. It was played in 1982 and it starts off as a French defense, and Mario Sibilio goes for this wing gambit, which you really don't see. The wing gambit turns a very one-dimensional French defense into a very tricky game, and after Sergio plays the move knight h6, he plays this weird move because he can't play the natural knight f6, and he doesn't really want to block in his bishop this way. Mario plays the move a3, gambiting the pawn again, and after Sergio captures it, he doesn't even take back, he plays c3 because he has enough pressure on this pawn, he can just continue with development. Sergio pounces on this opportunity and centralizes his weird knight on h6 with the move knight f5, but this might come back to bite him in the end, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Mario continues by taking the pawn on a3, and he's going to get his knight into the game, and Sergio wants to get his knight into the game. He needs to catch up on development. He's up a pawn, sure, but he needs to catch up on development if he wants any chance in this game. He's going to bring his knight out, and then Mario is going to develop his knight again. He's moving the same knight twice in a row. Now there's a double pressure on this pawn, and Sergio tries to kick this knight away. He wants Mario to undevelop, and this knight just has to go back to where it came from, and it seems like a wasted move for Mario. But if you take this rook falls because there is a pin. So Mario does not have to move his knight yet, and instead he kicks Sergio's knight with the move g4, and this is why knight f5 maybe would have come back to bite Sergio, because he doesn't really want to come back here and allow this trade. He doesn't want to bring this back and block this bishop from ever getting into the game, and he actually just has no other moves because the knight is in such an awkward spot. Sergio looks at Mario and says, danger levels, bishop d7, now if you capture my knight, which is destined to fall really on this square because it has nowhere to go, I am going to capture your knight, and this is not a pin anymore because the queen can capture. But Mario looks back at Sergio and says, danger levels, bishop g5, attacking the queen. Sergio has a simple response to this though, and it's simply bishop e7. You don't really want to take this bishop because then the knight can take and reroute to a decent square where it's not bullied by the white pawns, and then it's suddenly white's knight who's under threat and has to come back. This is no longer a pin because the queen sees it. The knight will have to drop back and make a long reroute to the e3 square or something, which really puts black into a good position, being up a complete pawn. Mario now initiates the first big trade of the game by trading off the knights. He captures the knight with his pawn, and Sergio does the same. Now Mario goes for danger levels, taking this pawn. And you might be wondering, why can't I go here? Because then you take with this pawn and the king has to take. If you take with the queen, you lose this bishop. You take with this king, you don't really get castling, and this is very, very good for white. Sergio obviously sees this and decides that he is going to take back the pawn first and get his bishop out of danger. Now the rooks are traded off, the queen recaptures, and Mario plays the move rook g1, getting his rook into the game. He doesn't really have the intention of castling this game. You don't have to castle, and Sergio now plays the move queen a3. Queen a3 leaves a pawn hanging, and Mario does just that. He captures the free pawn, but obviously you can take this one at some stage, which Sergio obviously will. But first he can use danger levels and take the bishop. Mario decides that he wants to take with his rook to get it active. It's attacking this pawn now. And then Sergio decides that he wants to take the pawn. The king is forced to shuffle over. Black castles, and then Mario decides that he wants this knight. It is attacking this pawn, and he doesn't want to deal with it. He feels that his bishop doesn't have much of a future on this side of the board, so he trades it off for the knight, and Sergio recaptures with his bishop. We're on move 19 now, and the stalemate is very close. You can see here that black is attacking this knight 2 times, so Mario plays the move king g2. And now Sergio is really pressing Mario, playing the move bishop a4, attacking the queen, of course, and Mario simply responds with the move queen e2. But things start to look a little bit shaky for Mario after Sergio plays the move bishop c2, and the bishop is obviously destined for this square. You might think bishop e4, why not rook here? Well, then takes, and this pawn is going to run. This is the pawn that Sergio won out of the opening from the wing gambit, and it's just going to win him the game if all the pieces are traded off. So Mario obviously doesn't want this, and he plays the move knight e1, but Sergio is like, okay, well, I'm going to check you anyway. I can still check you. Your king's in danger. I'm going to do that. Mario says, okay, but I'm going to play f3, and I'm going to block you. And what are you going to do now? And then Sergio says, I'm going to sack my rook. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sack my rook. He thinks that he can win the rook back. After knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, check is forking. But he missed something massive, and you might be able to see it, because after king h3, queen takes rook, there are no moves for white except for the queen. The black queen cuts off all of the white queen squares. The king is blockaded by his own pawns. These 2 pawns are blockaded. And if you play queen f8 check, the only move for the black king is to take the queen, and it is stalemate in 26 moves.